Hello, everybody. Today I've got Michael from Xano with me, who's going to be talking about um, all the cool things that Xano can do with Bravo. And I think they're a great combination. I mean, it's one of the earliest tools that we started working with. So, Michael, maybe as a starting point, do you want to sort of talk a bit about yourself and give people a background to Xano? Because a lot of people, I think, would benefit from using it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and just talk to a few slides here. And thank you, Toby and Bravo Studio, for having me and Xano today. We're super excited for this. So let me go ahead and I'm going to share this. And let's just give this a second to load here. Okay, you see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Beautiful. Okay. Yep. So as mentioned, my name is Michael Udinski. I'm with the Xano team, and I run the customer success program as the customer success lead. And so just a quick little agenda for today. So we'll just spend about 5 minutes or so, just an introduction, talking more about Xano, how you can use it to supercharge your Bravo experience in your business, and why use Xano. And then I'll jump into a quick demo where we'll build something pretty cool, a little more on that later, showing you the Xano platform. And then also I'll give it back to Toby and he can talk about the connection between both Xano and Bravo Studio. And then we'll have ample time for question and answer at the end. So first I want to just start off talking about software today. And there's really two main pieces to it. And first, that is the front end. You can think of this as your Bravo Studio mobile application. So this is everything that your user might see and interact with. And then there's this more mysterious piece called the backend. And this is all the behind the scenes logic that goes on. And it consists of a server, a database, and API. So to explain this, mysterious backend, we like to use this metaphor of a restaurant. So if you think about a restaurant, first, you have a customer that comes in. They might look at a menu and place an order to a waiter. Now, this can be a specific order. Let's just call it a hamburger with no onions, right? So the waiter will take that specific order and deliver it to the kitchen. The kitchen will then serve up that order, give it back to the waiter. The waiter then delivers it back to hopefully a happy customer. So in terms of software, the customer is like your front end or your Bravo Studio mobile app. The waiter is the job of the API and business logic. Okay, it's like this messenger between your Bravo Studio front end and the backend database, being the kitchen, which also is the server. Okay, so when we talk about Xano as a backend, it plays the job of both the waiter, being that API and business logic, and the kitchen, being a scalable server and flexible database. But why? Why use Xano with Bravo Studio, right? So Xano is your entire backend. We provide every single piece of that scalable backend from the managed server, flexible database, and the API with our no-code API builder. Whereas some tools you might see are just a database or others just connect apps together. We provide a fully scalable backend that can grow with your business. And Xano can integrate with data from anywhere and power many front ends. So not only can Xano power your Bravo Studio mobile front end, but later on you might decide, I need a dashboard for my sales team. Xano can power that as well, being your backend source of truth. Also, when you're building an app, you'll start to find that you're working with a lot of APIs. For example, you might need to integrate with something like Stripe API to process your payments, or Twilio API to send your users SMS. So Xano can connect to any external API, and I'll actually demo that today. So a little bit later here. Also, so compliance and security. So with Xano, we provide you with dedicated resources, which means, for example, your server can be deployed in Germany or another region that might be required for your business. So we give you this single tenant setup which allows Xano to pass these rigorous different audits for these different standards like PCI compliance, GDPR, ISO certifications, even HIPAA compliant. So all these can really supercharge your Bravo experience and your business. And then here at Xano, we're 100% backend focused and built for scale. So we know that we will never scratch the surface of being an awesome as a front end as Bravo Studio. We really want to build ourselves up to be the best backend possible to help you scale your business. And we basically, from Xano's birth, created Xano with best practices in mind for scaling. So we use Dockers to containerize your instance, Kubernetes to orchestrate scaling, built on a PostgreSQL database, which is flexible enough to be scaled horizontally and vertically. And then it's all hosted on the Google Cloud Platform. And lastly, our mission is to remove barriers that prevent people from creating scalable, world-class software. Great. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into a demo of Xano. And the demo will be using OpenAI, which is a project by Google that lets you leverage the power of AI through this API. And we'll use that to basically build a backend for a restaurant reviews app. Okay, so go ahead and switch my tab over here. And I just want to make sure now you see Xano. Get a confirmation from Toby before I continue here.
Yep, looking good.
Awesome. Cool. All right, everyone. So right now we are seeing Xano. And the first step to starting a Xano project, we create a name for our workspace, which is just synonymous with whatever app or project we're working on. So we'll call this Restaurant Reviews App. And let me just hit next here. Okay, and today we're just going to start from scratch. I just want to point out, we see a lot of people graduate into us from Airtable when they realize they need something more scalable or to do more complex operations. You can just import your Airtable base and start with all your data in Xano. But I'm going to start from scratch. On this page, we're just setting up our database and our API. So our database is going to be pretty simple for this demo. It being a demo and all, it's going to have a user table and also a table for our reviews. Okay. And then just to point out your API here, what Xano will do for you is auto-generate all your basic CRUD API endpoint operations, which is just a really nice baseline to start with. In Xano, you can create as many API endpoints as you want from scratch, get as complex as you may need to be. I'll create one from scratch today, but just know that that is all those CRUD operations are created for you. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to skip this part. We have this marketplace where we have integrated with some external APIs just to make the heavy lifting a little easier for you. For example, there's payments with Stripe, email, SMS, etc. But I'm just going to skip that for the sake of time. Lastly, user login or authentication. So Xano actually sets up user authentication for you out of the box using JWE tokens. But you see we have all these sign-in providers like Google, Facebook, Auth0, etc. Once again, those are available in our marketplace. Just know that if you would like to put that in for authentication. So I'm going to hit finish. And what that does is it actually takes us to our project, or as we like to call it in Xano, our workspace. So I'm going to first just jump to the database and show you what that's about. And then we'll jump to the API and our OpenAI API and start to work with that. So here in the database, you can see here are the two tables I set up. We can, of course, add more tables, do our Airtable import from here, etc., even CSV. So I'm just going to jump into this user table and let's just do some raw data entry for now. And I'll just create myself as our first user here. I'll say michael@email.com and something like password 123. Okay, so we'll just have one user, name, email, password. That's enough for this demo. And then let's create this review table. Here you can see that we just have this unique ID number, this timestamp for when the record is created at. So if this is a restaurant reviews app, we're going to need a few things, right? So we'll need information on what restaurant it is, right? So we'll go ahead and say have a text field here and say restaurant. And then I can add another column up here, and this will be a text field, and this will actually be the review, right? We'll go ahead and hit save. And then one other thing, we need to track who is creating these reviews, right? So we need to make a relationship here to our user. So to do that in Xano, we can go ahead and select this table reference option, excuse me, and then select which table we want to make that relationship to. So we'll make it to that user table. Okay, so here in the review table, we have a restaurant, the actual review, and the person who reviewed it. Okay, so simple setup for now. We won't add anything in here just yet. We'll let the API do that work for us. So now let's go ahead. I want to quickly jump to the API, and we organize API endpoints into different groups for you. So if I click into here, you can see we already have some API endpoints. As I mentioned, we auto-generated those basic CRUD API endpoint operations. So these are ready to go for you. There's also the authentication endpoints. Do want to point out, we auto-document everything for you in Swagger. Just kind of open that real quick. And this is just automatically synced with any changes that we make in Xano. So especially if you have someone who is dedicated to working on the front end and someone dedicated to working on the back end, this is really nice to have all your API documentation in one place for your front-end engineers.
Actually, can I just mention something here quickly, briefly, Michael? And just to let people know, this is actually one of the things that's really powerful, the connection between Bravo and Xano. Because all the documentation is automatically generated, the APIs are generated, and because Bravo has a Swagger import, we can actually take that whole list of APIs. I think we'll show this later, but we can take all the APIs you generate, so all the logic or whatever, all the CRUD things that you need to do for your application, and you can bring them straight into Bravo, so you don't have to build it up step by step. You can just do it all in one go. And that means you can take an application and put it into Bravo really, really quickly, which is a huge time saving. And I don't think many people realize that feature. It's a really powerful one between the two. So I just thought I'd make sure I highlight that because that's quite an important thing.
No, thank you for that. It is an incredibly powerful feature and huge time saver. And I agree with you. I don't think enough people know about it. So thank you for highlighting that. Awesome. Okay. So back to Xano. I'm going to add a new API endpoint from scratch. So I'm just going to add API endpoint, start from scratch, and this will be our review generator, okay? And this will be a post verb, and I'll go ahead and hit save. So when I do that, now what we're seeing is a new view, right? So this is what we call our no-code API builder. So what we've done here is we've created the anatomy of an API endpoint for you to build in a no-code way. So part one is inputs, also known as query parameters. And this is just any information needed to be taken in by your API endpoint to go ahead and do whatever logic or process it's going to do. Number two is the function stack. And this is the actual inner workings of your API endpoint. This is what it's actually doing. Third is the response. So something optional we want to return in the API endpoint, right? We might want to send some data to the front end. Just real quick, I want to back it up to this function stack. And you'll start to see this in the demo here, but you can stack functions in here and they'll be performed in a linear fashion. And we're also able to pass data from function to function in the form of something called variable. So once I start to get into this demo, it might make a little more sense here. But first, let's go ahead and I actually want to jump over to OpenAI. So once again, this is a project by Google where we can leverage the power of AI through an API. So for this, I'm going to just jump to this examples tab here. And you can see they have all these different examples of leveraging the power of AI. And I know at the bottom here, they have this pretty cool restaurant review creator. So if I actually go ahead and select this, you can see we're just turning a few words into a restaurant review. You get a prompt, name of restaurant, some notes, and you get this sample response back, right? So what's also cool is they give us the curl command. And that's cool because in Xano, we can actually build calls to external APIs like this with the curl command. So I'm just going to simply go ahead and copy this, and I'll show you how we can do this in Xano. I'll jump back here. And so in my function stack, let's go ahead and add our first function. And you can see this panel on the right opens up with tons of different options, and there's even functions nested within here. But I'm going to start with this external API request. So I'll go ahead and open this up. And when we see that, we have this import curl option. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Remember, I copied that curl command from OpenAI. And if I hit import, this is pretty cool because it programmatically builds this API call for us. So you can see here all those parameters. We have the URL, etc., even the authorization here. And you'll notice I actually need to go get my API key here. So I'm just going to save this real quick. And let's jump to OpenAI. And I'm going to go to view API keys, which you should never do on a screen share like this. So I'll make sure to revoke this token afterwards. But I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. And the nice thing is they've already set up our authorization in the exact way it needs to be. Authorization, bearer. And you can see they just have this placeholder here for my API key. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight that and paste that in. Great. So I'll hit update and save that. So right now we're just still using the parameters they had in the example, but I should be able to run this and get a successful API call and see that same result. So if I just go ahead and hit run here, and we scroll down, you can see there's all this information that comes back, and we have the same review here. So the Blue Wharf is a great place to go for a lobster dinner, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the same review that they had in the example. But what we want to do is we actually want to start to make this call dynamic, right? Because we want our user coming in, putting in a restaurant name, a few notes, and then this API creating the actual review for them. So let's go ahead and put in our first inputs. So we'll just call this restaurant. So that will be our restaurant name. And then we'll do another input, and this will just be, we'll call it notes, and this will just be notes about the restaurant. Okay. So now that we have these inputs, how do we connect it up to this API call? Well, we know that we want the prompt to be dynamic because that's where, when we looked at the example, the restaurant name was and the notes. So let's actually go ahead and click on this. We click on prompt and we click on the value. So you can see here is the Blue Wharf and some notes about it that created that first review there. So we can go ahead and start to replace this. So where Blue Wharf is, I'm going to do something, and it's called %s here. And this will allow me to apply a filter in Xano to do text substitution. And let me go ahead and also do it for notes. And I'll show you how this works in just 1 second. So I'll do another %s. So we have two %s's and two inputs, right? So if I just go ahead and save this, and right here on this value, we can add a filter. And filters are a way for on-the-fly data transformations in Xano that are very, very powerful. So there's a whole lot in here. We have documentation and tutorials on all this. I'm going to search for this one called sprintf. So formats text with variable substitution. So this filter will go through and look for that %s variable. And as many as there are, we can have as many different arguments for it. So we have a name and those notes. So we're going to have two arguments. So we know the first one was the restaurant name, and the second one was notes. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit update, and we can see how that changes now with that filter. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And so now, if we put in new values here, we should see a whole different review. So let's go ahead and say, for restaurant, I'm going to say a place down the street from me. That's really good. Obi Noodle House. They have juicy chicken wings and a fun atmosphere. And I'll go ahead and hit run. And once again, we get all this information back. So let's scroll down to our text and let's look at our review. So if you're looking for some delicious chicken wings in a fun atmosphere, Obi Noodle House is the place for you. The wings are juicy and cooked to perfection, and the atmosphere is always lively and inviting. Whether you're stopping in for a quick bite or staying out for the night, Obi Noodle House. So that's pretty cool, right? We're leveraging the power of AI with just a few pieces of information to make this dynamic restaurant review. Awesome. So let's go ahead now we want to actually, isolate this information, this review, because there's all this other information that we don't really care about, frankly, for the purpose of this demo. But how do we isolate this? So what I'm going to do is right here at the top, I can actually copy this entire response. And if I go into my function stack, I'm going to go to data manipulation and create a variable. And variables are just containers for data, right? And as I mentioned, we can pass these data from function to function. So if I just call this variable name here review, right? And I hit this drop down. Well, if I select my API call, which is the variable API1, and I select subpath here, well, I can actually just paste that entire response and hit define. And what that allows me to do is now I can visually traverse through that entire response, and I can select exactly what I want. So our review was all the way nested down here as this field called text under this choices array here. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. And Xano will populate this thing called dot notation, which allows us to traverse through different levels of data. So let me go ahead and hit save. And I'll just change the response just so I can show you how that actually is working here. So I'll just hit save. And now when I go ahead and run this again, and we might even see a different review because sometimes the API call will make a different review here, but it looks to be just about the same. Okay, and you see now we just are getting our review back. Awesome. So what's next? Now we want to actually add this to our database. So once again, going back into our function stack, database request, and let's go ahead and add a record to our review table. So now here we can actually map up the fields to different values that we're getting either from variables or inputs. You can see Xano was able to find that there's a restaurant field and a restaurant input. That's perfect. So review, we'll just go ahead and map it up to our variable review. And now user ID. So how do we get this? So we don't want the user to have to be inputting their actual user ID because they're not even going to know that, right? However, what's most likely is your user will be logged into your application or authenticated when they're doing this. So right now, this endpoint doesn't require user authentication, meaning they don't have to be logged in to use it. What we can do is we can enable user authentication here. And why that's important is because now we can actually find the specific user ID based on their unique auth token. So if I go into my add record here and I go to map up my user ID, well, now if I type auth, we can see there's this option for auth ID. And I'll go ahead and select that. And I'll hit save. So now let's go ahead and I'm just going to change our response to the result of our add record, which is review_1 here. I'll hit save. So now if I go ahead and run this, well, first of all, this looks a little different, right? I can't just hit run. It's requiring me to get an auth token. So normally how auth tokens are received is, when a user authenticates either by logging in or signing up to your application. But here in Xano, just for testing out your endpoints purposes, we can quickly grab a user's auth token. So we only have one user here. So I'll go ahead and grab that. And if I hit run, and we just give it 1 second here, well, we can see that we have our new record. And if you don't believe me, let's just go ahead and check the database real quick. If we go to our review table, here we have our restaurant, OB Noodle House, user ID 1, which is Michael, myself, and our review all gets added in there. So pretty cool. In just a few minutes, we were able to build a pretty simple backend with a review generator API that uses an external API and OpenAI, a project by Google once again, to create this dynamic review generator that leverages the power of AI. So I'm going to go ahead, stop sharing, and I'll pass it back to Toby at this point.
Thanks, Michael. So yeah, as you can see that what Xano gives you is the ability to all that sort of business logic. And I think one of the things that particularly a lot of users I speak to say is they often get to use Airtable. Airtable is used by a lot of people. And really, what Airtable gives you that ability to store data, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't let you use much anywhere near as much business logic as people would like. And so, if you want to go beyond the standard Airtable sort of data flows, you want to start into more complex logic using other APIs, being able to process things, or even particularly using users. That's where I think Xano, that's where I tell a lot of people that Xano is a much better starting point, because you end up trying to do this, particularly often users trying to customize their applications for, personalize it for different users. Trying to do that as Airtable as possible, but you have to do a ton of work yourself. With Xano, it's kind of built in. So it makes it, like, as you saw it there, it automatically generated what the user ID was because it knew who's logged in. Airtable doesn't really know that. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. What I'll do quickly now, I'll just briefly, is to just show let me just, if I can find it. Let's see. I've just done a similar. I've just been taken. So it was really touching on what I mentioned earlier with the whole situation with the APIs. So what I'm going to have to do is probably bring this across so that it can be seen properly. Okay, there we go. So if I just show it here, 1 second. Here it is. So as I'm going to jump around on these a little bit. So hopefully, Michael, can you see this? This is the API spec, Open API spec.
Yes,
Can you
I
see
can
that?
see it.
Is that okay? So this is basically, it's a lot of text on the screen, not super helpful for most people. But when you click on the link in there that Michael showed you, you can actually generate what's called the API spec, which is really how this API works. This is like the structure of the API and how the different sort of details of it are structured. And what can happen? What you can do is you can take this and you can pull it into Bravo. So I'm just going to jump back to that now because I have to do this because unfortunately my tab is not set up very well. Let me show that in Bravo. So here we go. So what you can do is you can go to API collections. You can create a new collection. You can actually import either a swag or an API file depending on what type it is. So you can save that file locally that's generated by Xano, and then you can pull it in. And then what it will do was it will basically pull it in, and it will actually populate all the different requests along here. And it'll add in the URLs, it'll add in the different parameters. So it really saves you a lot of time having set it up. And really everything you do, you build the logic in Bravo. So you build in Xano, you can then pull into Bravo, and then you can then set it up. So for example, if this is a post request, so these parameters will be available in Bravo to connect to your application, or if you're getting data like all the user records, or probably more importantly the reviews, where are that? Here are the reviews. There we go. Then it will compile all the reviews, and this may work. There we go. So you can pull reviews, and I think the other thing that's really nice about this is it's already selected all the data. This is one of the things that's actually I would particularly highlight as great about Xano. Not only does it tell you the data you need to make the call, but it will also, in many instances, will tell you the data that comes back. So you don't need to make the request to be able to do what we call selecting the data by choosing what gets displayed. It automatically knows that because it brings in from the API requests, which can save you a ton of time. So you can automatically bring these API requests in and structure it. And then, so all you have to do really, once you've brought those APIs in, is go in Bravo to the application. I just made a little example one here. It's a review app. And you can just basically say, okay, I want in my comment list, let's say the username is going to come from, well, we know who the user is because they logged into Bravo as well, but let's say the caption. Actually, before I do that, I just need to do this. Xano review demo. Let's have a look at get all reviews. So select that to get all the different data in, and then in caption, I can just connect it to the review. Oh, sorry, that's user records. 1 second. There. There again. Sorry. Query all reviews. There we go. 1 second. I think I connected. I'm not doing the same things. I need all the review records there, connected data, and then I can then connect it to the review. Okay, and so that will then bring it in, and I'll be able to see all the list of reviews in Bravo. So once you set up in Xano, just by putting all the APIs in, the binding becomes so much faster, and I'd be able to implement things in Bravo, many times faster because the API I think is available, which is super helpful. I did actually have one question, actually, a couple of questions actually, Michael, if that's okay.
Of course.
One of the things actually that I think would also benefit a lot of our users is the snippets and the marketplace. So, I mean, I don't think so. And actually, one of the things I'm not sure about is, are snippets? Do snippets go into the marketplace? Is that how you do marketplace things, or because just to give people some background? So obviously, Michael mentioned the marketplace, which is where people there are certain external tools that allow you to it sets it up for you in Xano, but it's also possible once you've created something in Xano, not only the business logic, but also the database structure to be saved as a snippet. And one of the things that I'm starting to try doing is, as well as I create certain sort of features for Bravo, is to create them as snippets so that we can let people kind of move faster. So rather than you having to create logic every single time, and not necessarily a full feature like connecting to Facebook, but like, setting up certain certain structures in Bravo, by saving it as snippets, you can save yourself a lot of time. So having a few snippet blocks, you can bring it in. But it's not something I've seen a lot of stuff. I mean, I know you've launched it relatively recently, but is it something that you're pushing more now, the snippets? And how does that fit with the marketplace things?
Yeah, great question. So you're absolutely right. The Snippets is fairly new, but we will definitely be starting to push it here over the next coming months. So the marketplace is stuff that is really internally built by our Xano team with, as I kind of mentioned, there's things like sending email with SendGrid or Stripe payments. But what's great about Snippets is anyone, as you mentioned, can create them. So you can create entire backends, package it all in a snippet with the API endpoints, the database schema, even records if you choose to, and publish it for the public to use and download. So it's really a great tool. We're going to be obviously improving the flow a little bit and really pushing snippets, but the Xano team, we've created a handful of users have started to get on there and utilize snippets. So you can find that just if you go to xano.com/snippet. And real quick, I'll share my screen again because I just want to show people how you can create a snippet. And let me just jump back to my Xano screen here. Awesome. So, okay. So for example, and I'll actually do this after the call, so you can go and use this review generator API and just download it to your workspace if you want. But I'll remove my API key, so I'll do it after the call. But let's say that you have a cool API endpoint and you want to actually share it, right? So there's this snippet button here, and you basically can give a name, some details on it, a helper video. And if you go to edit what's included, you can start to add as many API endpoints as you want. Okay, so it's not just one and done. If I hit go back, you can see we can also choose to include database records. Obviously, this endpoint works with both of my tables, review and user, so it is going to be required if I want to include this API endpoint. But we'll hit create, and then it gives you a share link, and it's public on xano.com/snippet. So yeah, look for this snippet later today. I'll make sure to create it after this call. I just want to remove that API key, and I'll make sure to include some information so you know to grab that if you want to try it out.
That's awesome. And now there's a couple of Anze has raised a couple of questions which I think Prakash has answered already. So thank you very much for that, Prakash. That's great answers. Is there Anze, is there anything else you'd like to ask? Was anybody else who's here who'd like to ask a question? Because I think we're getting to time now, so it'd be useful just to kind of see if there's anything anyone wants to talk about while they while they think about that, maybe I'll ask just one more question. So what's next for Xano? What's the sort of up and coming things over the next 6-12 months? Is there anything big on the horizon that we should all be aware of, particularly us, so we can make sure we use it really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can go ahead and tease that we are working on a second iteration of our function stack. So once again, I'll just quickly share my screen to remind people what the function stack is here. So the function stack is where right here in the middle of the no-code API builder, where we build all our business logic and get as complex as we may need to be. So it'll go through some styling, usability, probably make things just a lot cleaner, group things, copy certain functions. I think it'll be really exciting. Also, as mentioned, snippets will be starting to get more attention. We're probably going to improve the flow a little bit, make it more well known. So it's going to be really a way to make it even easier to put different reusable pieces of logic into your application backend. Different use cases, like for example, I've created like a password reset snippet. There'll be things like that you can just add to your Xano project and have all those common pieces of app logic in there.
That's very cool. The one thing I would say is, as a bit of feedback, I guess, one of the things I always struggled with, and maybe other people have seen this, but when I'm looking at the function stack, there are some things that are available in the function stack, well, the things in the filters that aren't available in the function stack. So the filters seem to be way more, well, there's a lot more things in there. And I guess there's reasons for that. But when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, it's not possible to do this because I was looking for it in the function stack. And it wasn't clear to me that actually in Xano, a lot of the things actually make more sense and probably more efficient to do as filters. So that's one of the things that probably people need to be a bit more aware of, because that wasn't straightforward. And it was always the thing that I struggled with a bit at first. And then I realized that actually it's because I really should be trying to push stuff into filters as a first point of call, rather than trying to do things in the step-by-step function. So it's a little bit of a thing. Hopefully maybe the next version makes that a bit easier to think about.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and we need to do a little bit better job of surfacing that. So function stack 2.0, hopefully that will be addressed and more apparent. But exactly right. So the function stack doesn't really just end at the functions. As Toby just mentioned, there's all these filters which oftentimes can be a little more efficient, and you can sometimes even do a little bit more with these data transformation filters on the fly. So make sure to definitely explore that. They're documented, but as mentioned, they're maybe not apparent when you're in there and pointing and clicking right away.
Well, one thing I should say actually is that Xano has really good videos, and Michael is just about in all of them. But I think the number of times, Michael, you saved my ass trying to figure out how to do something because there was a video for that specific problem, and it's very good. So I really appreciate all the things that you've done there. It's very good. Anze's just got one question he's brought up, which is a question for me, I think, which might actually back to you a bit, Michael. This is about trying to do reset password, anonymous login, delete account with Xano user auth. I think we had some users trying to do this. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but to do things like password reset in Xano, you kind of need to use something like SendGrid, don't you? Is there what's the sort of general structure or the best practice for doing that?
Yeah, so I've set up a password reset snippet, and it does leverage SendGrid to use Magic Link in order to do that. However, if you didn't want to use SendGrid, you could, swap out that API with something like a Mailgun or another email service provider. You could even use something like a Twilio to send a SMS to your user if you don't want to use email. And I think Prakash just actually put a snippet for the password.
You're like a tag team here working on this like simultaneously. It's very impressive. And I think, and actually one of the things I would say about Xano that's really powerful is that there's not a lot. Most of the things you can kind of delve into. So, for example, I think with anonymous login, there's a number of ways of doing that. But because you can control the authentication endpoints and also the tokens and stuff, you can there's several ways of making anonymous login as well, right? You could have like users going in with a default password or what actually is the best practice? What would you recommend for anonymous login?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So anonymous login, at the end of the day, you're still creating a user. It's just going to be basically a, more or less an empty record on your user table. But they're going to come in, they'll authenticate, but they won't put down a, email, name, password, and you'll generate an authentication token for them. So that authentication token, you can actually set the expiration to be custom. So if you want that expiration token to last for days and weeks, so this anonymous person is still coming in, and their token's not expired, and they can still have their their session information of what they're doing on your app still available. I think by default, Xano's auth token lasts, I think, a day, but that number is completely customizable. You just go into the function that says create auth token and put as many seconds as you want that token to last. But overall, a user record's still getting created. They're just not putting in that email, password information, and then they're generating a token. So there's going to be a user ID attached to that token. But other than that, it's anonymous.
Awesome. Okay. I don't think there are any more questions. Michael, is there anything else you'd like to cover? I think you covered off a lot today, so really appreciate that, your time for that. But is there anything else that we should talk about, or I think we're good to wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just close on, we have a free plan on Xano. We, recommend, if you've never used it before, start on the free plan. It's generous. It lets you use all the core features of that function stack that we talked about, so you can start to dive into some of that complex logic, and see if Xano is really right for you. Try and connect it to your Bravo Studio app. Pass some data through, start to do things free of charge, and then if you figure it's right for you and you want to start scaling with us, then you can upgrade from there and begin that scaling journey. And last but not least, as Toby mentioned, we have tons of resources, lots of YouTube tutorials, documentation, our community, similar to Bravo's community. It's on Circle. So we're here to help.
Great stuff. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Hopefully that's been useful for people. And yeah, look forward to seeing the new release of the function stack. I think that is going to be awesome. Great stuff.
Yeah, it will be.
All
thank
right.
you for your time, Toby, and thank you, Bravo Studio, for hosting us.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.